We live in a world of infinite natural beauty, yet there is poverty and disease. Even a century ago, when South Africa was a land of fortune and opportunity, there was also the same degradation of the human spirit. Although Mahatma Gandhi left South Africa to take up the cudgels of freeing India, his spirit, based on this truth, continued to fuel South Africa's own liberation. This influence was symbolically cemented when a portion of Gandhi's ashes were brought from India in 1948 and immersed outside Durban. When Mohandas Gandhi came to this land of promise as a young lawyer and encountered this stark contrast, his earnest search for the truth began. During his stay at Inanda, just north of Durban, this search evolved into one of the most powerful tools for non-violent resistance in the world, the philosophy of Satyagraha, a force born of truth. The spirit of Gandhi's non-violence philosophy has permeated South Africa's struggle for liberation. Mewa Ramgobin, ex-grandson-in-law of the Mahatma, has made it his life's mission to champion this cause.
On that library there we had his general works, by him and on him.
I was born in Inanda into a family which with time became a little affluent. My grandfather came here as an indentured laborer, but my father in his time became an employer of labor. The most important part of my growth was the contradictions in my own family. A very nice, peaceful family, a very caring family, a loving family. Nonetheless, because we are all fallible, there were contradictions. And one of the contradictions that existed in my family, which embarrasses me at times, but in the spirit of honesty, one cannot deny that this existed. My growth and development was also dependent on a very vicious labor system. The sugar industry at that stage here, dependent to a very large extent on migrant labor from Transkei. And a very vivid memory of one youngster, I knew him as Kampan. To this day, I don't know his surname. We could play around together. During the day, I would laugh with Kampan, I would enjoy bride mealies with him. And come evening, I'll be in the comfort of the four walls of my bedroom, my bed, and looking out through the window, you realized that he goes into the compound.
When Mewa was a young, impressionable boy, he recalls a friendship with a servant. He compared his own comfortable life to that of his friend, and the inequalities that he found stirred his soul, spurring him onto a political career to fight the injustices that he found around him.
I'm glad I didn't acquiesce. I'm glad I didn't succumb.
Well, Satyagraha for me is the whole, idea of opposing an evil, as I said earlier, to accept something that is wrong is like condoning it. So the first thing about Satyagraha is that you have to oppose it. The second thing is that you don't become violent. The third thing is that you mobilize people. And in mobilizing people, you have to, have the idea of transformation rather than conquest.
Honesty and truth, the fundamental basis of Satyagraha, is necessary to see beyond this material world in order to heal it. Mewa embraced this quest for truth and to free South Africa from the shackles of oppression.
When I look at Gandhi's life and his pronouncements and his way of life, it was a walking symbol of his ideals. He used words like Daridra Narayan. What is Daridra Narayan? God in the poorest. Serve the poorest of the poor. But the question arises again, why should they be poor and the poorest of the poor? What is this dichotomy? What is this division? Do I have to go and do things for them? Or do I share their responsibility to make a better life for all, which Gandhi calls Sarvodaya?
When Mewa started his own family, these early memories never left him, inspiring him on to a broader, more liberal type of thinking, finding values in all different faiths.
I'm a Hindu. My wife is a Muslim. And our son from our union has adopted the Christian faith. We live together in one house. We eat from one pot. We have this different symbols of the different religious faith systems in our home. I like it.
Mewa has so many striking features. A tremendous sense of humility, a total sense of dedication. But he's a very deeply religious man who believes in his Maker. In his own quiet way, he does his prayers at home, he lights the lamp at home, but not the kind of person who will go out and make an issue about it. But there's no question this deep spirituality and this relationship with his Maker is what has sustained him.
He sees in what we think is an ordinary human activity. He sees a relationship between that with the spiritual. But I believe this is a higher form of giftedness. A visionary maybe that's what he is, a visionary. But I still want to call him a deep spiritual analyst.
I've come to understand that Daddy's spirituality is a very practical one. His spirituality comes from giving to others. I don't think he's a man that emphasizes ritual and prayer as such, but I think his prayer is in the form of what he gives back to the world. And when you look at his life and you look at what he has given back, I would definitely say that, you know, he is certainly a man of God and a man who's guided by God in his own way.
It is very significant that it was here at Phoenix Settlement that the first call was made for the release of Nelson Mandela and all political prisoners in 1971. If Satyagraha is going to work, it will rework in Africa. Mahatma Gandhi and his vision for the world is more relevant now than ever before.
The life of Mewa Ramgobin, freedom fighter, activist, and now committed national parliamentarian, mirrors the struggle in search of truth, carrying the torch of Satyagraha to set ablaze oppression and light up the lives of those in need.
Mewa in the new democracy, Mewa in the struggle, the person is essentially the same. To survive the years of the 60s and 70s, you had to be an idealist. You had to be the kind of person who believed in something, the visionary.
Mewa is one of the stalwarts of our struggle. Here at Parliament at the moment, I would say Mewa is the pillar of the strategic committee of the ANC. But what I found more interesting with Mewa also is that he's a believer. He's got faith, very deep faith. And I understand that it's one of the things that keeps him balanced because he doesn't undermine his spiritual life.
The level of any people or any grouping's civilization has a measurement. And one of the measurements for the level of any one civilization is its ability to extend compassion, to extend mercy, to extend love. Or else who are we?
The truth that Satyagraha forces one to address sees into the stark inequalities of our world. Followers of this philosophy engage in non-violent but nonetheless forceful activities to bring about change.
The one thing he always talks about is that his passion is for the poorest of the poor. Anyone you interview that knows Daddy for many, many years will quote that line of Daddy's, that everything we do at Phoenix is for the poorest of the poor. And I think it's something he truly feels. And even in our own lifetime, the manner in which he sacrificed from our lives, from his own time with his children, with his family, of his own income, just to give to others, was truly phenomenal.
Go and give a man a meal today and leave him in his poverty? Or do you alter the material conditions which keeps him in poverty? So in seeking Gandhi's Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, he's asking us basically to engage in action based on truth and love. The centrality of the Gandhian vision in respect of the poor is very clear to the rest of us. Is it possible for us to survive when we are surrounded by a sea of poverty?
Mewa took this philosophy and then said we need to put it into practice. And then he coined the term, the Gandhian trilogy of Ahimsa, Satyagraha and Sarvodaya. And he's honed in on Satyagraha because particularly in this new age and in the very early days of the struggle, Mewa was very clear that he as such was going to follow the path of Satyagraha, of non-violence.
Phoenix Settlement, Gandhi's institution, indeed subsequently became a challenge to the apartheid system. A challenge to such an extent that it had to be destroyed by the apartheid system. And it was destroyed in 1985.
His stay in Phoenix, as much as it highlights his activism, with the call for clemency, revival of political bodies, education camps, etc., was also the most trying years of police intimidation.
I was banned in 1965, again in 1971, then again in 1976, and again in 1981. So for those 17 years, I was both banned, house arrested and banished to this area.
Many people succumb to the fear, to the repression that you see around you, and then begin to accept, that look, we may as well, keep low profile, carry on, because we don't want to go to prison, we don't want to be banned, we don't want to be house arrested.
He pursued his beliefs with feverish steadfastness despite all harassment. In 1973, intimidation came to a head when he and his 3 children were almost killed in a bomb blast in Durban.
I believe it was South Africa's first parcel bomb sent to me in 1973. Exploded in my office. And 3 of my children, Kedar, Kush, late Kush, and Asha were with me. Asha and Kush is slightly injured, but fortunately, all of us survived.
Mewa's experiences, however painful, never made him a bitter person. His constant challenge to go beyond understanding and to actually live it served as a driving force in motivating Mewa to pursue the portrayal of Phoenix settlement as a symbol of satyagraha. By 1983, there was a massive mobilization of people against the apartheid government, with rampant strikes, consumer boycotts, and rallies being the highlight of the day. Phoenix played a major role in bridging like-minded parties together in the fight against oppression, always stressing non-violence and honesty. The United Democratic Front was thus born.
In 1983, the United Democratic Front was established. It was the largest mobilization of people inside South Africa ever against apartheid. And I think that shook the foundations of the ruling order.
The South African government at the time was placed in an embarrassing position. The inauguration of P.W. Botha as Prime Minister should have been the news headlines. Instead, Mewa was a part of the freedom fighters that sought political asylum in the British consulate in Durban.
Some people thought it wasn't useful, but there's no question in terms of focusing on the struggle and taking the media highlight away from the Botha government. That was an important decision. It was controversial, but he believed it and he said, like, that's what we're going to do.
It was a time of heightened political tension, with the international community focusing on Durban.
Will be discussed further after the court's judgment.
To facilitate the immediate arrest by the South African police of the three leaders.
They came to our house, and in my children's presence, they said, you know, that is what's going to happen to your husband. And the children were terribly traumatized, you know, that we're never going to see him again. But they didn't find them. And then the next thing was that they all appeared in the consulate, the British consulate. So it was really a very, very difficult time, trying time for us, because one never knew when, you know, people would break in, and there were attempts, there were threats that they were going to kill them in the British consulate.
The episode of the British consulate upset the government. The government retaliated by instigating a violent division of the people of Inanda, leading to the Inanda riots of 1985.
Phoenix settlement, the residents here, the same thing happened. This building here was destroyed. They couldn't destroy the museum and the library because the walls could withstand their unsophisticated burning. The press building was gone. Gandhi Sarvodaya was the last to be destroyed.
This stirred emotions in him. But not emotions of hate and anger, rather the dream of rebuilding Phoenix from the ashes of Inanda.
In 1961, there was a particular kind of conduct here, which is Gandhian in concept, which is a very good one, where you had daily prayers of in all different faiths in Sarvodaya. Behind me here, where all the children from the settlement got together.
When people begin to realize for themselves that, look, what we've done is wrong, and, you know, let's change. And change is possible. Change is not, you shouldn't be ashamed of changing. Gandhiji himself said, you know, every book that he wrote, before the book starts, he's got a little paragraph to say that I'm saying this, but I reserve the right to change my opinion at any time.
When Phoenix was burnt and destroyed, in 1990, when they started to rebuild Phoenix, one of the issues that was on the table was whether or not to remove the people were the squatters, basically, who were living on the land. And I think one of the things that Daddy was always really determined about was that they should not be moved. And he used the line that you cannot make homeless people more homeless.
Today, Mewa lives in Cape Town with his wife Miriam and their son. He has walked a long road, a journey filled with many trials and tribulations. Through all the darkness, his focus is still on the light, the brightness of a world free from conflict and the pain of poverty.
He's had lots of threats on his life. He's had bombs, he's had his son killed, and he believed in Satyagraha all the time. And in this new South Africa, where we need reconciliation, where we need a sharing of from the haves to the have-nots, where we need this, as Thabo Mbeki said, there's two Africas, where we need a reconciliation. He sees Satyagraha as a very important component and taking Gandhiism to the next level.
I would say with the likes of Mahatma Gandhi that it becomes the bounden duty of all South Africans who subscribe to that vision. It becomes their bounden duty to make South Africa livable for all who live in it.
With the dawn of a new South Africa, his journey continues, Satyagraha forcing him to look at our world as it is, still with its stark inequalities, still with the poor and the unemployed, still with the homeless and the sick.
When we say we have got to fight poverty, we have got to address the question of homelessness, we have got to find freedom from bad health, from illiteracy, from homelessness. These are all Gandhian in concept. That political freedom is one thing, but the total liberation of human beings from want, from disease, from poverty, from illiteracy, from homelessness is another.